I did not set out to bleed on the Scourstone Plateau. No one does. Not if they've heard the warnings whispered by desert guides or the frantic mutterings of old caravan hands who drink too much after sundown. But the plateau has a way of choosing its moments, the way a wolf chooses a lamb limping at the rear of the herd. I was not limping, but I was alone, and the plateau seems to sense that more keenly than any physical weakness. The sun was still low when I first saw the red stone rising from the horizon, flat-topped and shimmering in the heat like a mirage waiting to discard its illusion. The desert wind brought dust and the faint smell of baked minerals, a scent I had long grown to associate with solitude and danger. I breathed it in anyway. It was the closest thing to comfort I'd had in weeks. People had told me the plateau was cursed long before I ever decided to cross it, but I had dismissed them. I needed to reach the other side, and the detour would have added 10 days I could not afford. Desperation eats through superstition faster than fire through dry grass. Still, their warnings lingered like gnats around my thoughts. That the land was hungry, that blood drawn on Scourstone did not soak into the earth but disappeared, as if the land swallowed it. Superstition. That's what I kept telling myself. But superstition becomes faith when you start to see the teeth beneath the legend. I tightened the straps of my pack and adjusted my canteen, feeling the weight of it. Water was low, dangerously low. The last well I'd found had been fouled by something. Iron in the water, metallic and dark, as if blood had seeped into the ground upstream. I had poured it out. I'd rather die of thirst than poison myself. The climb to the top of Scourstone Plateau was easier than I expected. The red stone was pitted and ridged, weathered by centuries of wind, and offered good handholds. My boots scuffed against the rock, leaving faint marks that seemed to vanish when I looked back at them. That should have unsettled me more than it did. At the top, the land stretched out before me. Flat, barren, cracked like dried skin. Red dust coated everything. Even with the wind, nothing moved. Not a bird, not a beetle, not a whisper of plant life. Just the silent expanse of stone broken by deep fissures and jagged ridges. It felt like standing on the hide of some massive sleeping beast. That thought should have unsettled me too. I walked. My footsteps echoed faintly, as if the stone had hollows beneath it. The sound reminded me of tapping on a sealed tomb. The kind of sound that makes you realize there's a space inside large enough to hold something or someone. Around midday, the wind shifted, and a shiver crawled across my skin despite the heat. I tasted dust, thick and metallic on my tongue. It clung to the inside of my mouth and made my gums ache. I spat, and the saliva hit the stone with a wet pat that felt too loud in the oppressive quiet. The moment it touched the red surface, it vanished. Not evaporated. Vanished. I knelt, touching the spot, but the stone was dry. Warm. Hungry. I recoiled from the thought, but it sat heavy in the back of my mind. Nothing should drink moisture that greedily. Not stone. Not soil. Nothing natural. I forced myself to keep walking. My throat tightened from the dryness, and when I took a sip from my canteen, the water felt like fire sliding down my throat. I capped it quickly. I didn't know how much farther the journey was across the plateau, but I knew one thing. I didn't have enough water to waste. The first fissure appeared in the late afternoon. It stretched across the plateau like a horizon line carved into the stone, wide enough for a wagon to fall into. I approached carefully, kneeling at the edge. A breath of cold air drifted upward, surprising in the relentless heat. The darkness below seemed endless, like looking down the throat of a god. A faint sound rose from the depths, a soft shifting, like pebbles sliding against each other. Or bones. I stood quickly, too quickly. My vision swam and the world tilted. I grabbed my head, steadying myself. Dehydration, I told myself. Nothing more. I skirted the fissure, staying several feet from the edge. At one point, the wind gusted sharply, and I felt it push me toward the crack. I leaned away instinctively, my boots skidding slightly on the dust. The ground shifted beneath me. Not a lot, just the softest give, like stepping on a lung that exhaled under my weight. I froze, breath locked in my chest. The shifting stopped. The ground beneath me settled, as if whatever had moved decided patience was better than effort. I walked faster after that. By the time the sun began its descent, the shadows on the plateau lengthened, turning the fissures into dark slashes across the land. In that twilight, the cracks looked deeper, wider. I tried not to think about that. The desert gets cold at night, and I needed to find shelter. Shelter on Scourstone Plateau. Ridiculous thought. Still, I searched for a ridge or an overhang. The best I found was a shallow depression in the stone, barely enough to shield me from the wind. I set my pack down and sat with my back against the curved wall of rock. The stone felt warm, almost too warm, as if it retained heat unnaturally well. The wind died completely as night fell. Silence swept across the plateau, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my ears. Even my heartbeat sounded too loud. I pulled out a strip of dried meat and chewed slowly, grimacing at how little saliva I had left. Every swallow felt like dragging sandpaper down my throat. The moment I bit the inside of my cheek, just a small nip, I hissed. A bead of blood rose, slid down my tongue like liquid heat. I spat onto the stone beside me without thinking. The reaction was immediate. The blood hit the rock, and the rock pulsed. Not figuratively, not imagination. I saw the stone ripple, like a drop of water striking a still pond. The red surface darkened, the blood vanishing as if sucked into the earth by invisible lips. I scrambled to my feet, backing away so quickly that my pack toppled over. The stone beneath the bloodstain shuddered again, softer this time, as if settling, as if satisfied. I pressed myself against the farthest edge of the shallow depression, my breath ragged. I waited for something else to happen, for cracks to open or some creature to emerge, but nothing did. The plateau returned to stillness. But it wasn't the peaceful silence from before. Now it was the silence of something listening. I didn't sleep much. Every time my eyes drifted shut, I saw the ripple again, felt the pulse of the ground beneath me. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me into a restless half-sleep. I dreamed of red mouths opening in the stone, whispering in voices too faint to understand. Dreamed of fingers reaching from cracks to pull me under. Dreamed of a heartbeat pulsing through the earth like drums beneath the ground. When I woke, dawn had barely begun to touch the sky. The depression around me felt deeper than it had the night before. That wasn't possible. But the walls of stone seemed subtly changed, smoothed in ways that suggested movement. I checked my pack. Everything was there, but unease gnawed at me as I strapped it on and set out again. The morning cold bit into my skin as I walked, but the stone beneath my feet still felt warm. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange on the plateau, stretching and folding over itself. The sun arced higher, casting harsh shadows. At some point, I realized there were no clouds. None at all. The sky was a perfect, merciless blue. Not even distant haze. It reminded me of a dead eye. I was staring upward, thinking how unnatural it looked, when my boot caught on an uneven part of the stone. I pitched forward. Instinctively, I thrust my hands out to catch myself. Pain sliced across my right palm as a sharp edge of stone carved into my skin. I landed hard, breath punched out of me. The blood came fast, too fast, and for one horrific moment it felt like it was being drawn out rather than flowing naturally. No, no, no. I yanked my hand up, clutching it against my chest, but a few drops had already splattered onto the plateau. The stone reacted instantly, a sound like inhaling, a ripple spreading outward, a vibration traveling up through my knees where they touched the ground. I scrambled backward on all fours, heart hammering, watching as the red stone pulsed again and again, each wave fainter but unmistakable. I stood, swaying, dizziness threatening to topple me again. My hand throbbed, blood leaking between my fingers. I used the cloth from my pack to wrap it tightly, but the bandage darkened quickly. "How much more do you want?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The plateau didn't respond, but the ground didn't settle either. It vibrated faintly beneath my boots, the tremor steady and persistent, like the purr of a massive predator. I kept moving, The fissures grew more frequent as I continued, some narrow enough to step over, others requiring long detours around yawning abysses. At one point, I saw bones on the far side of a crack, bleached white, picked clean. Human? Animal? I couldn't tell from the distance. The ground trembled again. There was no wind. I felt watched. The plateau stretched endless before me, but something told me I was not halfway across. Not even close. And then I saw it. A figure. Far ahead, standing near the edge of a jagged fissure. Still. Silent. Facing me. Relief surged through me so quickly it made my knees weak. Another traveler. Someone who could help me. Someone who might have water. Someone who, the figure didn't move. Didn't raise a hand. Didn't call out. Just stood. Too still. As I drew closer, slowly, cautiously, details emerged. A dark coat. A hood pulled low. Arms at their sides. No visible back. No gear. They did not shift their weight. They did not breathe. It wasn't a person. But it had once been. The figure was dry. Desiccated. Skin pulled tight over bones. Mouth open in a silent scream. Eyes hollow. Clothes clinging to a frame that looked as though every fluid had been drained from it. I took a step back. The ground beneath the corpse was darker, stained. But not with fresh blood. The stain looked old, yet unnaturally preserved. The plateau doesn't forget. The thought chilled me. I turned to leave, to go around the corpse, but my foot brushed against a small stone. The sound echoed. The ground responded. A sharp tremor. A splitting sound. A crack forming beneath my toes. I leapt back just as the stone collapsed inward, creating a new fissure only feet from the corpse. Something shifted deep below, moving through the earth with purpose. With direction. Toward me. I ran. Not out of fear, out of certainty. Whatever was beneath the plateau had tasted my blood. It knew me now, and it wanted more. I ran with every ounce of strength, ignoring the searing pain in my palm and the tightness in my chest. The fissures seemed to multiply as if the plateau itself were rearranging, widening paths that led nowhere, closing off paths that might have been safe. The red stone underfoot was slick with dust, and I nearly slipped more than once. Every step felt like sinking deeper into a trap I could not see, only feel. The corpse, or what had once been a person, was still behind me, but the sound beneath the plateau grew louder. A low, throbbing rhythm, like a pulse, vibrating through the soles of my boots, up my legs, and into my chest. I stumbled over another fissure, catching myself on jagged stone, and swore under my breath. My eyes darted around for shelter, anything to hide from the hunger I felt beneath my feet. But there was nothing. Nothing but the endless red wasteland and the fissures that seemed to watch me. I tried to call out, hoping some human sound could anchor me to reality, but my voice sounded small, swallowed instantly by the plateau. I swallowed dust and tried again, this time louder, but it was pointless. The plateau had ears that did not need mouths. It had eyes that did not blink. Then I tripped. My body tumbled forward, and I landed hard, scraping my legs and stomach against the stone. Pain shot through me, but I forced myself up. That's when I saw it. A fissure that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just a crack in the plateau. It was a gaping maw, opening wider as though it were breathing. The shadows within it writhed, like something alive waiting to pull me under. Instinct screamed for me to run. I obeyed. Every time I ran, the ground seemed to change under my feet, fissures appearing and disappearing, making the path unpredictable. My muscles burned, and my lungs were on fire, but the thought of stopping was unthinkable. Whatever had awakened beneath the plateau was patient but deliberate, and I was an intruder it would not forgive. I glanced at my hand, wrapped in the filthy cloth. The blood had soaked through and dried in patches. I thought about spitting it onto the stone, testing if the hunger would respond again, but fear held me back. Fear and the instinct that I had already fed it enough to take notice. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in a blur of red stone and jagged cracks. The sun was low again when I came across another corpse, half fallen into a fissure. Its skin had the same desiccated tightness, its mouth frozen in a silent scream. Its hands reached toward me, grasping at empty air, and I swallowed hard. My stomach churned. I felt its eyes on me, even though they were nothing but hollow sockets. The plateau doesn't let you forget what it has seen. The ground beneath me thrummed. I realized I had been running blindly, following some instinct rather than a path. The hunger beneath me shifted, changing direction, following. Panic clawed at my chest. My legs wanted to collapse, my lungs begged for air, but my mind forced me forward. I had to reach the plateau's edge. I had to survive. That's when I heard it, a low, wet sound, like a mouth opening in the stone. The vibrations beneath my feet quickened. Something massive moved beneath the red rock, fast, patient, and precise. I knew I could not outrun it forever. I spotted a small overhang ahead, just enough to shield me. Without thinking, I dove under it, dragging myself into the shallow cave. Dust filled my lungs, making me cough and gag. I pressed my back to the stone, listening. The tremors continued, softer here but insistent. I could almost feel the heartbeat of the plateau. Then I noticed something disturbing. The air in the overhang was warmer, almost suffocating. The red stone around me pulsed slightly, like it was breathing. I pressed my hand to it instinctively, but the pulse moved up my arm, like a shockwave, making me stagger back. The blood on my hand from earlier, it was calling to the plateau. I had already fed it once, and now it knew I was here. The overhang did not feel safe anymore. Felt like a trap, a cage built to slow me down while the hunger below considered its next move. I forced myself to move again, limping slightly, but faster than I expected. The plateau seemed alive, shifting under my weight, fissures forming and closing, as if it were herding me toward some unseen center. And then I saw it. Pit. A massive gaping pit at the plateau's center, surrounded by broken stone and jagged ridges. From its depths rose a heat that made the air shimmer. A smell hit me. Iron, raw and metallic, like blood long dried but not forgotten. My stomach turned. I didn't want to go closer. I wanted to turn back, to flee, but I had no idea where back was anymore. The plateau had erased it. The fissures, the cracks, they were no longer just obstacles. They were guides herding me toward the pit. And I realized something. The pit was the source. The hunger, the pulse, the whispers in the dust. It all came from there. I approached cautiously. The ground trembled with every step. I peered over the edge and my stomach dropped. Something moved within the pit. A dark mass, coiled and writhing, rising and falling as if it were breathing. Its shape was impossible to discern, shifting constantly, but I could see fragments. Bones, teeth, hands, trapped within its body. It was alive, aware, and it knew I had come. The plateau beneath me pulsed in response. The fissures radiated outward, sending vibrations through my feet. I felt dizzy, like the earth itself was trying to pull me in. I stumbled backward, panic clawing at me again. I needed water. I needed escape. I needed anything that wasn't this. But then I realized something worse. I was trapped. The plateau had no edges. I had walked in circles without knowing it. Every step forward brought me closer to the pit. The fissures were no longer obstacles. They were walls, guiding me toward the hunger's heart. I tried to shout, to call for help, but no sound came out. My voice was swallowed by the stone, erased before it could leave me. And then I understood. The plateau doesn't just consume blood. It consumes presence, time, memory. Reality itself bends to its hunger. I didn't know how long I had been walking. Minutes? Hours? Days? My wounds burned, my mouth was dry, and my vision blurred. The hunger beneath me pulsed, and I knew it would not stop until it had me completely. I had to fight. I tore a piece of cloth from my pack, wrapped it around my hand again, and forced myself to move toward the pit. Not out of hope, not out of courage, but because I knew if I stopped, it would claim me anyway. The ground beneath me groaned, fissures spreading like veins. The pit loomed closer, the heat radiating, the smell of blood thickening. I could see the mass within now, writhing and twisting, pieces of old victims trapped in its fleshless body. And then I understood. The plateau is not just hungry. It remembers. It holds every drop of blood spilled on it, every scream, every death, every soul that wandered too close. And now it was remembering me. I felt the earth tremble again, and this time I didn't think it was from beneath me. The stone was alive underfoot. It was watching me. My every step was an invitation to whatever lay below. The pit yawned before me, deeper than I could measure. It pulsed with a rhythm that was no longer just the thrum of hunger. It was a heartbeat, a massive, inexorable pulse that filled the air. I knew now that there was no escape, not from the plateau, not from what it had become. I stood at the edge of the pit, my vision swaying, my thoughts in fragments. The heat coming up from the depths made my skin crawl, and I could feel my heart hammering, as if the very rhythm of my blood was syncing with the pulse of the land. It was drawing me in, beckoning me closer, feeding off my fear and desperation. The mass in the pit was clearer now, its form more distinct. It was not a creature in the traditional sense. There were no limbs, no eyes, no mouth. It was a mass of twisting shadows, bound together by bone, blood, and something older, something far darker. I could see hands, human hands, reaching out from the depths, but they were dry, cracked, as if they had been clawing their way out for centuries. They were not alive, not anymore. Yet they still moved, still grasped at the air, pulling the others closer to the center. I took a step back, and the plateau reacted immediately, sending a sharp tremor through the ground that nearly knocked me off my feet. The fissures widened, the earth groaning beneath me as if it were stretching, trying to swallow me whole. A voice whispered in my ear, faint, distant, but unmistakably clear. "It remembers you." I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one there, just the red stone and the endless cracks that seemed to open at my feet. The voice echoed in my mind, as if the plateau itself was speaking to me, feeding me its hunger. "It has tasted your blood." The blood on my hand, still wrapped in the cloth, throbbed, ached in a way that I could not explain. It was as if something deep within the plateau had claimed it, absorbed it, and now it wanted more. I clenched my fist, the pain in my hand spreading through my wrist, up my arm, into my chest. I could feel the hunger pulling at me, calling to me. It wanted my blood. It wanted me. I didn't know what to do. Everything around me was breaking apart. The ground under my feet shuddered with greater intensity, and I could feel the stones shifting beneath me, grinding together like teeth. The red earth seemed to be alive, alive with hunger. It wasn't a land of rock. It was a creature, a predator that had been waiting for something like me to wander too close, to bleed. I had bled once before, but now it demanded more. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the panic that tried to overtake me. I needed to get away. I needed to find shelter, to find something that could give me a chance to escape. But where? There was no shelter here. There was only the pit and the land that craved my flesh. I turned away from the edge of the pit, only to find that the plateau had changed again. The fissures had shifted. The path I had come from, if it could be called a path, was gone, swallowed up by the red earth. The horizon, which had once seemed so open, now pressed in on me, narrowing until there was nothing left but the jagged ridges of stone. It was as if the plateau had folded in on itself, trapping me inside. My chest tightened. Couldn't breathe. I was not alone anymore. The air was thick with the smell of decay, the scent of old blood, the stench of death. It was everywhere, rising from the cracks in the earth, wafting from the pit. The plateau wasn't just hungry. It was thirsty for souls, and I had fed it. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. My body felt like it was made of stone, heavy and immovable. The weight of the plateau pressed on me, pressing my ribs, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I looked down, and that's when I saw them, small, dry hands, rising from the ground. I jumped back, gasping, heart slamming in my chest, but the hands didn't stop. They emerged from the earth, dry and desiccated, clawing their way upward. The skin was shriveled, the nails long and cracked, but there was movement. Purposeful movement. They were reaching for me. I stumbled away, but the hands followed. They broke through the stone, dragging themselves upward with an unnatural speed, like they had been waiting for me. The whisper returned. "You are the sacrifice." The words chilled me to the bone. I looked around desperately. There was nowhere to run. The plateau had closed in around me, and the hands were coming faster now, dragging themselves up from the cracks, reaching toward me. I could feel them pulling at my ankles, at my boots, trying to drag me down into the earth. I fought them, kicking and screaming, but there was no use. The more I struggled, the more the ground seemed to tighten around me, as if the very earth was trying to pull me into its hunger. I kicked again, harder this time, and felt something snap beneath my heel. For a moment, the ground stopped moving. The hands paused. I dared to look down, my breath shallow and ragged. I had broken through the surface, broken through the earth itself. And underneath I saw something. A flicker of motion. A face. A human face, but not quite human. It was pale, sunken, hollow-eyed, and it was staring back at me from the depths of the earth. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. It was trying to speak to me, but the only thing I could hear was the thrum of the plateau's pulse. "The hunger," I gasped, pulling my foot away from the pit, but the hands tightened their grip, dragging me down, pulling me toward the ground that seemed to crack open wider with each passing second. I screamed. I should have known. I should have understood. The plateau wasn't just a place. It was a graveyard, a place where souls were consumed, where death was not the end but a promise of endless suffering. The blood that was spilled here fed the earth, and the earth demanded more. And now it wanted me. I fought with everything I had left, kicking and scrambling, trying to tear my way free. My hand, the one wrapped in cloth, throbbed again, sharper this time, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath my skin. I felt something shift in the air, something unnatural, a pressure building, like the weight of the world was about to descend on me. Then, just as the hands pulled harder, just as the earth seemed to split open completely and swallow me whole, I heard the whisper again. "It remembers your blood." And then, it stopped. The hands retreated. The ground settled. The pulse of the plateau quieted. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know what had spared me, but I knew one thing. I had felt it. The hunger beneath the earth. The unquenchable thirst of the Scourstone Plateau. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I had not escaped it. Not really. The plateau doesn't let you leave. Not if it remembers you. Not if it has tasted your blood. And I had tasted it. I lay there for what felt like hours or maybe days. Time seemed to warp and stretch in that place, bending the laws of the world to the hunger of the plateau. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps, and my heart was still racing. The pain in my hand had dulled, but the memory of it, the pulsating ache, the dark hunger beneath the skin, lingered, like a shadow clinging to my bones. I didn't dare move at first. The plateau was still, too still. The hands, the faces in the earth, the pulse. All of it had receded, leaving me in a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Like the earth was holding its breath, waiting for something, or perhaps for me to make the next mistake. I didn't want to move, didn't want to stand, but I knew I had no choice. The plateau didn't give you a choice. It only took. The weight of it pressed down on me, the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. I pushed myself to my knees slowly, my body stiff and aching. I could still feel the pull of the stone beneath me, that magnetic draw as if the very earth wanted to drag me back down. I looked around. The fissures had closed. The cracks that once seemed like paths had sealed themselves. The plateau had shifted again. What had been an open expanse was now an unbroken sea of jagged rock, stretching into an endless horizon of red and dust. There was no way out. No sign of where I had come from. No sign of anything but the land that had consumed every trace of human presence. I was trapped. I stumbled to my feet, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. My head spun. I had no idea where to go, or why it even mattered. The plateau had swallowed time. It had swallowed me. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shifting shadow, an illusion born of the desert sun. But no. As I squinted against the harsh glare, the shape grew clearer. The figure. It was standing in the distance, just at the edge of my vision, but it wasn't like the others I had seen, the figures that had been dried and decayed, their souls long consumed by the plateau. This one was different. It was moving, not stumbling like the others, not crawling from the earth with hollow eyes. It was walking. My heart skipped a beat. I thought of the faces in the ground, the dead hands that had reached for me. I thought of the pit and the hunger that had followed me. I took a step forward, despite the fear that froze my bones. Maybe, I told myself, maybe it was someone who had survived, someone like me. I had to know. I had to see if there was a chance, any chance of escape. The figure moved steadily, its steps slow but deliberate, drawing closer. The shadows stretched around it, growing longer as the sun dipped lower, casting the plateau into an even more oppressive silence. With each step, the figure became clearer, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a woman. She wore tattered clothing, dark and torn, like she had been wandering this wasteland for years. Her hair was wild, unkempt, but there was something about the way she moved, a grace in her steps that felt too human, too alive. I forced myself to keep walking toward her, my body heavy with exhaustion, my mind screaming at me to stop. But I couldn't. Not now. Not when there was someone who could be the key to understanding this place. I had to know. She stopped. The moment she did, the plateau responded. The earth trembled beneath my feet, the ground shifting as if it were deciding what to do with us both. I stopped too, instinctively. My body screamed at me to turn and run, but I stood frozen, unable to look away. She turned toward me, and for a moment, I thought she would speak, that I would hear a human voice again after all this time. But instead, she raised her hand slowly, her fingers curled, as if beckoning me forward. I didn't move. The plateau seemed to grow even quieter, as though it were holding its breath. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. The figure in front of me was no longer just a person. She was part of the plateau, part of the hunger that lived beneath its surface. I felt it in the way she stood, too still, too purposeful. She wasn't alive in the way I was. Not anymore. I took another step, and she took one too. Her eyes locked onto mine, cold and empty. Her face was gaunt, hollow. Her skin stretched tight over her bones like a mask. But there was something else there too. A glimmer of awareness. A flicker of recognition, like she knew me, like she knew exactly who I was. I froze. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice a rasp, barely more than a breath carried on the wind. I felt the weight of her words, the truth in them. The plateau had seen me. It had tasted my blood. And now, like all the others, I was part of it. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat felt tight, dry, like it was filled with dust. I wanted to ask her what had happened, how she had survived, but I knew better than to ask. She had no answers. She was as much a prisoner of this place as I was. She took another step forward. Her eyes never left mine, and the tremors in the ground grew stronger. The earth was closing in, pulling us both into its hunger. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. The plateau was alive, alive with the souls it had devoured. And now it was preparing to claim one more. Me. I staggered backward, my hands reaching for something, anything solid. But the plateau had already begun to close around me. The fissures were disappearing, the ground rising, pulling itself together like a living creature, a mouth opening wide to swallow what remained. "It has tasted you," she said again, her voice softer this time, almost mournful. "And now it will never let you go." I tried to scream, but my voice was lost. The earth beneath me trembled violently, and I felt the ground shift, crack, and split wide open. I fell. The air was ripped from my lungs, and I felt myself plummeting downward, deeper into the heart of the plateau. The last thing I saw was her face, hollow and silent, staring down at me as I disappeared into the darkness. I don't know how long I fell. The darkness that swallowed me was not just the absence of light. It was a suffocating thing, a force that clung to my skin, to my bones, like the very air was made of dust and silence. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every instinct told me to fight, to scream, to claw my way back to the surface. But I was weightless, suspended in a blackness that made even thought feel slow, thick, like it was sinking into the ground. Then, a shift, a jolt. I slammed into something solid. Pain exploded in my chest as the air was knocked out of me. I gasped for breath, my hands instinctively reaching out, trying to steady myself. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating void, but something beneath me gave way, like soft earth beneath a heavy stone. I dragged myself to my feet, trembling, disoriented. My hand shot out in front of me, feeling the jagged edges of something cold and rough. Stone? Flesh? It was impossible to tell. It was as if the ground itself had transformed beneath my touch, as if the earth had become alive, breathing with a dark pulse that matched the beating of my heart. I pulled my hand back quickly, but I had no choice but to move forward. The air smelled of iron, of blood, and the deeper I went, the more pronounced the scent became. It clung to the walls, to the floor, to everything. The smell was thick, almost tangible, like it was clinging to my skin, pressing against my nostrils. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea how deep the plateau had pulled me. I could only move, only stumble forward, hoping that the ground beneath me would stop shifting long enough for me to find some kind of footing. The sounds began after a while. Low murmurs, like voices whispering just at the edge of hearing. The closer I came to the source, the clearer they became, until they were no longer whispers but low, guttural sounds that vibrated through the stone. They were speaking, no, chanting, almost in unison. It wasn't a language I understood, but it didn't matter. I knew it wasn't meant for me to understand. It was meant to consume me, to draw me deeper into the earth. I pressed forward, my hands scraping along the stone walls for guidance. The floor beneath me had softened, as though it were not stone but something much more alive. My boots sank slightly with every step, leaving deep indentations behind me, but they never filled. The plateau had no intention of letting me leave. Suddenly, the path ahead opened up. I staggered into a large chamber, vast and cavernous, and for the first time, I felt like I could see. The air was thick with heat, and the ground was slick with some dark substance that glistened like oil under the dim, unnatural light. I looked up and saw it, know them. Faces. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of faces embedded into the stone, frozen in expressions of terror and agony. Their eyes were wide, their mouths gaping as if screaming in their final moments, but no sound came from them. They were trapped in the stone, bound to it, as if the very earth had absorbed their souls, their pain, their suffering. The plateau had claimed them, and now it wanted me too. I stepped backward, but the ground behind me shifted, closing off the path. The chamber seemed to fold in on itself, pressing me further into the heart of the plateau. There was no way out, and then I heard it. A voice, clear and sharp, cutting through the chanting like a blade. "It is your turn." The voice echoed through the cavern, and I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Standing in front of me was the woman, the one I had seen before, the one who had called to me. She was not a corpse, not anymore. Her skin was stretched tight over her bones, but she moved, alive in a way that was unnatural. The hollow look in her eyes was gone. In its place was something else, something darker, more primal. She was smiling, but it was not a smile of joy. It was the smile of someone who had been consumed, someone who had become part of the plateau, part of the hunger that lived beneath it. She was one of them now. "It has taken everything from you," she whispered, her voice low and seductive. "And soon it will take you." I felt a shiver run through me. My hands trembled as I reached out to her, my mouth dry. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but I knew it was pointless. The plateau was ancient, older than any of us, and it would not let me leave. I had a choice, she said, her voice cracking like dry bones. I chose to stay, to be part of it. Her eyes, wide and knowing, met mine. It remembers your blood. It remembers the blood of all those who have come before you. And it will remember yours. I backed away, my chest tightening with fear. I could feel the weight of her words, and I could feel the weight of the plateau itself bearing down on me. The ground trembled again, the pulse of the earth matching the pounding of my heart. There was no escape. The woman reached for me, her hand cold and dry. She didn't seem to move quickly, but there was no mistaking the intent in her eyes. She wanted to pull me in. She wanted me to join her, to become part of the plateau's endless hunger. I turned to run, but the floor beneath me buckled. The faces in the stone shifted, their eyes following me as if they had seen this before. They had all been here. They had all run just like me. But the plateau never let them go. I fell to my knees as the ground opened up beneath me. I could feel it, the pull, the hunger. The earth was calling me, pulling me into its depths. It was alive and it was ravenous. I felt my body being pulled down into the darkness, as the woman's voice echoed in my ears. It has tasted your blood, and now it will consume your soul. And then the world went silent. The silence was absolute. The silence was absolute. The world had gone dark, colder than any night I had ever known. The pull of the plateau's hunger had stopped, and in its place, there was only emptiness. I could not feel the ground beneath me, could not hear the pulse of the earth. For a moment, I thought I had died, that I had finally succumbed to the consuming darkness. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. I tried to move, to open my eyes, but it was like trying to wake from a dream that had no end. There were no walls, no faces, no earth beneath me, just nothing. The weight of the plateau had lifted, but something else had taken its place. A feeling, presence, something watching, waiting. It was the kind of feeling that makes you want to look over your shoulder. But when you do, there's nothing there. It's the absence that presses hardest on your soul. And then a flicker, a light, faint at first, like a distant star, and it grew, pulsing, thrumming, just like the plateau's heartbeat. My chest tightened, and I tried to move again, but this time I couldn't. My limbs were heavy, as though made of stone, and my breath came in shallow gasps. The light grew brighter, warmer. It wrapped around me, like an embrace, but it wasn't comforting. It wasn't gentle. It was cold and alive, just like the plateau itself. The light didn't hold me, though. It didn't pull me in. It just illuminated the space around me, revealing something. Something in the dark. Faces. Thousands of faces. They were everywhere. I could see them now, their eyes wide and staring. Their mouths opened in silent screams. They were all here, trapped like me, their souls bound to the plateau. They were its children now, creatures of the land, devoured by its hunger. The light didn't touch them, but I could feel their presence, just as I could feel the pull of the plateau. It was a presence that had no shape, no sound. It was the absence that filled everything. It is not just a land, a voice whispered, coming from the darkness. The woman's voice. I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't help myself. There she was, standing just at the edge of the light, her figure darker than the shadows that surrounded her. Her eyes were locked on mine, hollow and knowing, and for the first time, I saw something like pity in them. It is a prison. The words made no sense. How could a land, a place, be a prison? How could something so vast, so endless, be trapped in its own hunger? But I understood then. The plateau didn't just consume the living, consume time, memory, souls. It was a prison for everyone who came to it. A prison for those who had bled, who had given up their essence to feed its unending hunger. The plateau kept them, kept us, as part of its endless cycle. We were not its victims. We were its nourishment. You are one of us now, she whispered. There is no escape. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight, to break free from whatever this place was. But I knew, deep in my bones, I had already become part of it. The plateau had marked me. It had consumed me. The blood I had spilled had fed it, and it had taken more than just my body. It had taken my soul, my memory. I had walked into its hunger, and now I was part of its endless feast. The woman stepped forward, and the light grew brighter, sharper, until it burned my eyes. She raised her hand, palm open, and I saw the same faces, same hollow eyes, same gaping mouths, beneath her skin, as though they had been fused into her. She was not one of them. She was all of them. She had become the plateau. She had become its hunger. "You will understand soon," she said, her voice soft, almost affectionate. "We are its children. We are the ones who remain, the ones who feed." I felt it then, a sudden shift in the air. The ground beneath me trembled again, and I could feel the pulse returning, stronger than before. It was the pulse of the plateau, the heartbeat of the earth, and it had come for me. I felt my body change, the pull of the earth tightening around me, as if the very stone was turning to liquid, sinking into my bones. My skin burned as though it were being peeled away, but it wasn't pain, it was something else, something darker, something that made me want to scream, but I couldn't. The plateau was inside me now, and it was claiming me fully, turning me into something else. Something not quite human, not quite dead. Something that would feed its hunger forever. I could feel the faces of the others, trapped beneath the surface. They were part of me now. Their voices were in my mind, whispering in unison. They had been here too. They had bled too. They had become part of the plateau's endless hunger. And now I would join them. There was no escape. And then the light vanished. The darkness swallowed everything. And I was no longer alone.